Everybody's approved the deal, and everybody wants it done. So it's going to get done.
Leaders in Tehran claim the president is just trying to add one more candle to his birthday cake as they snub a celebratory signing. But ending the war isn't the only present the commander-in-chief is looking forward to as preparations continue for a cage match on the White House lawn.
That's what Saturday Sunday is about. It's a gift to the American people.
Blood sport, reflecting pools, and the Kennedy Center. Many Republicans wondering if their leader has forgotten what got them there in the first place.
You know what I really love? I love the inflation.
An increasingly challenging Senate map, despite some Democratic missteps, is helping fuel a rebellion in Congress. With us today, from the Senate leadership team, Shelley Moore Capito of West Virginia, former Vice President Mike Pence, famed Democratic strategist James Carville, and as always, the journalists on our Best in the Business panel are here to lay it all out. The Hill Sunday starts now. Hello from Washington and welcome to the Hill Sunday. I'm Chris Stirewalt. Let's start with an update on the Iran negotiations and our own Robert Sherman, who's live in Doha, Qatar. Robert, what do we know today?
Hey, Chris, good morning to you. Well, things are moving here in the Middle East, with the president saying that today was the target day to get a deal hashed out and finalized between Iran and the United States. We know a Qatari negotiating team was sent to Tehran this morning in order to ice this deal and get it across the finish line. That's according to a source familiar in what they told us. But now there is a complication that has emerged over the last few hours, and it is these strikes that the Israeli Air Force has carried out on the southern suburbs of Beirut, a known Hezbollah stronghold in Beirut's capital. Israel says that this was in retaliation for a series of launches that were carried out by Hezbollah today, and they say they will not tolerate any more of these. However, Iran's parliament speaker seizing the moment to slam the United States over this, saying, and I quote, Israel's incursion into the southern suburbs of Beirut has once again shown that America either lacks the will to fulfill its commitments or the ability to do so. By giving the green light to the regime, you cannot gain concessions. The game of bad cop and good cop is outdated. If you lack the will and ability to fulfill your commitments, speaking of continuing the path is not possible. The reason this is important, Chris, 1 week ago, we saw a similar scenario playing out. Israel struck the southern suburbs of Beirut. Iran struck Israel directly. It was the biggest flare-up that we've seen since the April ceasefire went into effect. The question is, will Iran respond again for this round of strikes? Iran's military has says this action will not go without a response. Meanwhile, this is the day in which President Trump said a deal was supposed to get finalized with Iran, which would, first and foremost, reopen the Strait of Hormuz, get commercial shipping going. We've known that all parties have said this is the closest that they've ever been, but in the 11th hour, there's new uncertainty to these talks. Chris?
All right, Robert Sherman, a lot to cover. You're always there for us. We appreciate it. Okay. With us now, Senator Shelley Moore Capito. She is the chairwoman of the Senate Republican Policy Committee and our welcome guest. All right, Senator, a lot of people, including American consumers, would be very, very happy to have a durable peace deal with Iran, one that reopened the Strait of Hormuz and started to bring down energy prices. But we're all still waiting for word. First, is there anything that you can tell us about the situation or share any thoughts you've got on it?
Well, I think, first of all, the president should be congratulated for his patience in seeking a good deal. He wants to make sure that the straits are open and that the ability for Iran to build a nuclear weapon is severely diminished and off the table. So I think that's what he's looking at. And there's no surprise that at the end things get a little quaky, because I think anytime you're striking what would be a very significant deal, there's a lot of posturing. So I'm very excited about what I hear. I think the president and others who are negotiating this deal are going to get a good deal, and we're going to be able to rest a lot easier knowing that that Iran cannot ascertain a nuclear weapon, and that's in the world's best interest.
Okay, I want to ask you about FISA. Now, as I understand it, we're sort of in lapse right now. We've got a big international soccer tournament going on. We've got a sometimes shooting war with Iran, which is the world's leading sponsor or state sponsor of terrorism. How alarmed should Americans be that this post-9/11 surveillance program of FISA has lapsed because of a standoff between the Congress and the administration?
Well, I think the American people should be alarmed that the Democrats would play politics with our national security. Not only do we have the World Cup, we have a lot of America's 250 celebrations that we see all across the country. And to tie our intelligence community's hands and not allow them to collect data that we know has already disrupted terrorist attacks here. It has saved some terrorist attacks at concerts and other venues, large venues, and we're going to see these all across the country. So stop playing the politics. Confirm this Forward Intelligence Surveillance Act for the next 3 years with the reforms that they demanded that are in there. So, you know, you're getting what you want. Let's protect America. And I think that's the baseline message, especially as we move into the 4th of July.
And now that the president has a replacement for Bill Pulte as the director of national intelligence, you assume that when you guys are back in town that will quickly happen?
I think that's going to move very quickly. I think you see that his nominee has received both bipartisan support before when he was the SEC chair. He is now the U.S. Attorney in New York. He has great respect across Capitol Hill. He's well qualified for this, and it's very timely. Maybe it should have been last week that the president put forward, but I think you're going to see Senator Thune move this nomination very quickly so that we can have the best candidate in there for the D&I.
Okay, the majority leader also wants to move quickly on military funding. The Pentagon is running short on essential munitions, we understand. Where are you on the idea of using budget reconciliation to move a package like that so you all wouldn't need any Democratic votes in the Senate? The majority leader says he's open to something very narrow, but the president and a lot of House Republicans want something much, much bigger. Where are you on the idea of a skinny reconciliation 3.0?
Well, the president has asked for a 40% increase in our national security, and a lot of it is replenishing the weapons that we've been using and that we've sold to Ukraine and that we've used in the Middle East. And so I think it's important for our own security to realize that a lot of this will go to not just to our benefit, but to our great industrial manufacturing sector, which is domestically, and that's jobs, and that helps every state. Certainly, the state of West Virginia is included in that as well. In terms of reconciliation, I think that the president needs to come forward and is planning to come forward with a supplemental, which will take care of a lot of the additional funding that we're going to see here. I'll leave it to the leaders to figure out if we can do a skinny reconciliation. This last one you saw should have been done 4 weeks ago until it got into the political sector again with the Democrats stalling on national security and law enforcement. And so, whether we could do it again, I think we can do anything, but I think we ought to make sure that we're doing it the best way, the most transparent way, and I think a supplemental along with appropriations could be the best way to go here, but I certainly will look at a narrow reconciliation bill if it comes before us.
Okay, so whether it's the FISA extension, war funding, whatever it is, part of the challenge here is that the president has an increasingly antagonistic relationship with some of your colleagues. In a recent interview, Senator John Cornyn said that the end of the president's term would be the most miserable 2 years of his life. It's hard not to see this as stemming from the president's decision to endorse against Senator Cornyn in his primary down in Texas, but we also see a similar dynamic with Senators Cassidy and Senator Tillis. Has all of this primary back and forth complicated your job?
I think that if you look at the three senators that you named, who are very good friends of mine, and they're great leaders, they want a majority of the Senate to be in the Republicans' hands for greater reasons beyond their elections. And so I think while, there may be some stiffening of the spine in certain areas and maybe a little more frankness in their public statements, I think in the end, you're going to see them support strong national security and strong internal security, strong border security, as we already saw last week. It will be an interesting next several months, but I feel confident that we're going to keep the majority. And that's what Senators Tillis, Cassidy, and Cornyn want. They've expressed that repeatedly in our conference meetings, and they're always honest to their words.
Okay, now we got to talk about the really big stuff. You were in Omaha for West Virginia University baseball's big win in the College World Series, but you're not going to be there tonight for round 2. Baseball fans are very superstitious. I see you there with a notable Hampden-Sydney College graduate right there in Omaha.
Yes.
Have you considered relocating your office to Nebraska just for the duration of the College World Series, just to make sure that there's no jinx here? Have you thought about it?
You know what? I say go Mountaineers. It was one of the most wonderful experiences of our Charlie and I's life. We were in the box with Pat McAfee. I mean, does it get any better than that? I mean, he is a rock star and a WVU grad. The stadium was filled with Mountaineers, and I'm going to be tuned in heavily tonight to watch them rout the Carolina Tar Heels.
All right, Q Country Roads. All right, America, if you were going to celebrate, if you were going to celebrate West Virginia Day on Saturday by pouring one out for the state's first U.S. Senator, Waltman T. Willie, you would know her already. But if you don't, there she sure is, Senator Shelley Moore Capito. We thank you. Okay, coming up, former Vice President Mike Pence is here on Iran, the new divisions in the GOP, and his proposal for how to heal them. We'll be right back. Welcome back. With us now, the 48th Vice President of these United States, Mike Pence. He is out with a new book challenging his party to rediscover what he calls its conservative conscience. Mr. Vice President, thanks for being with us. We have to start on Iran. When we last talked to you three months ago, you told us that the right thing for the United States to do was the hard thing, to finish the job in Iran, even if that meant a substantial commitment. Looking at reports about the tentative deal, that doesn't seem to be where we're heading right now. So I just want to open it up for you to give your top-line response to what we're seeing or any potential dangers that you might see ahead.
Well, look, I think you have to give President Donald Trump all the credit in the world for being the first president since the Iranian Revolution in 1979 to take the fight directly to the mullahs in Tehran last year and this year. And our troops responded brilliantly in Operation Epic Fury and a year ago in Operation Midnight Hammer. My concern right now is not with the intentions of the president. Look, I think the president has earned a great deal of deference here by the American people. I just don't trust the Iranians. And I think the president and his team know well that no deal is better than a bad deal. Unless the Iranians forfeit and dismantle their nuclear program, dismantle their missile program, immediately open the straits and stop subsidizing terrorist groups across the region, then I think we would do well to simply let the armed forces of the United States of America finish the job. Open the strait on our terms, take down their missile capabilities, offensive military capabilities, and give the Iranian people an opportunity to reclaim their freedom. But I remain hopeful. As I said, I love my country. I long for peace. Prayed for the president's wisdom again today. But I think we got to draw a hard line here when we're dealing with the Iranians and the IRGC that's now in charge of that regime.
Okay, part of the limiting reagent here for the president on Iran is that he didn't get buy-in from Congress originally. It was supposed to be quick, and he wasn't going to have to do that. It seems like that has sharply limited his options. It got me thinking, many of the successes in the first Trump term were attributable, at least in part, to you and your team keeping things on the rails with Congress. Help us to diagnose the problem here. We talked to Senator Capito about these primary fights with the senators. What do you see as a cause of the friction here?
Well, look, it's part of the reason why I wrote that new book. I think for decades, the Republican Party has been defined by a broad conservative agenda. Really American leadership in the world, a strong national defense, a commitment to limited government, fiscal responsibility and reform, the right to life and values. And our battle politically, Chris, as you described better than most, has always been with a liberal Democrat Party. But I think there's been two different changes. Number one, I think the Democratic Party has been overrun by the progressive left that's embraced increasingly radical policies and even socialist policies, questioning our support for Israel and even supporting candidates that engage in open anti-Semitic rhetoric. But the book that I wrote, What Conservatives Believe, was also inspired by the fact that there's a new threat to that conservative agenda within the Republican movement, and that is from a populist right that would advance isolationism, protectionism, even question some of those cherished alliances as well. It's gained some purchase in this administration, not all. I'm proud of the fact that President Trump turned a deaf ear to those populist right isolationist voices when he struck Iran last year and again this year. But the stops and starts on Ukraine show the influence of those voices in and outside the administration. And I also think the embrace of policies like nationalizing businesses, broad-based tariffs, price controls, and marginalizing the right to life all suggests that I think a time has come for us to reflect on what conservatives believe. It's why I wrote this book, and I hope it's going to begin a great debate in this midterm and also as we go into 2028.
You got to my question. You knew exactly what I was going to ask you, Mr. Vice President, because you mentioned the pillars there, but this is what would we say, a choice, not an echo. This is a bringing up to date of Barry Goldwater's book, right? And all those things that you talk about, natural rights, the sanctity of life, limited government, free markets, peace through strength, traditional values, all that stuff definitely fits with the late 20th century GOP. And you allude to this, it doesn't sound like a lot of the current Republican Party. What do you say to those self-described national conservatives who say that the threat from the progressive left today is different from the Goldwater era, that these are unaffordable virtues, that you do not know what time it is? What do you say to them?
Well, number one, they're right about the progressive left. I mean, like I said in the book, I mean, the very idea that on the progressive left you have apologists for radical Islamic voices, even some candidates in the Democratic Party this year, people that engage in anti-Semitic tropes. And so I think we've got to redouble our efforts to make sure we keep those majorities in the Congress, and we're doing our part. But on the populist right, I honestly believe that it's not as widely known among grassroots conservatives that the populist right would have us walk away from our historic commitment as leader of the free world. It would essentially diminish America's role on the world stage, saying we've got problems here at home and we can't continue to be the leader and be the arsenal of democracy. And I reject that categorically. And I want to emphasize, I'm proud of my old running mate for turning a deaf ear to those voices when it came to Iran. My thought is probably those same voices on the populist right would urge a deal of any kind right now to end the conflict in Iran. But my hope, my prayer is that the president will continue to stand firm for a deal that secures a long-term peace and stability in the region. But those are the forces that are at work on the right now, Chris. You apprehended that a number of years ago, but my book is an attempt to really start a debate about what we believe.
They're trying to make me stop asking you questions, but I got to ask this. You denounced in pretty strong terms a proposed fund that might pay, among others, those convicted of taking part in the January 6th attack aimed at keeping you from certifying the results of the 2020 election. Similar claims of election fraud have returned about this year's midterm, raising the concerns about the possibility of a disrupted election this fall and maybe in 2028. How real do you think those concerns are? How worried should we be about that?
Well, look, I'm really pleased that the administration has taken a step back and, at least in court, abandoned that weaponization fund. I mean, look, I had no problem with the president pardoning people that got caught up in that day, but anyone who assaulted a police officer or vandalized the Capitol should never have been pardoned and should never get a dime of taxpayer money. But look, we've had a number of elections since 2020 and that controversy, and they've moved forward in an orderly way. I have great confidence in the American people, and frankly, in the election reforms that Republicans have led in states across the country, that we can be confident we'll get these elections done in an orderly way. They ought to be doing it quicker in California, but we'll get them done in an orderly way. I have confidence in the American people and our officials going forward.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Vice President. All right, America, if you were riding the Wabash Cannonball, you would know him already. But if you don't, there he is, former Vice President Mike Pence. We thank you. There is still much, much more ahead. Democratic strategy guru James Carville has had some tough advice for his party, but have they taken it too much to heart? We'll find out if you stay with us. Hey, good news, America. You're almost halfway through primary election season. So now we do have a better idea of how vulnerable the Republican majority in the Senate may or may not be. The House is going to blow with the breeze of public opinion, but the Senate is tricky because candidate quality matters so much more there. So here are the 11 Senate races that are at least nominally competitive. We've color-coded them by the party that controls the seats now. Democrats need to flip a net 4 seats to regain Senate control. So that means winning 8 of these 11. That is a very tall order, and it would require the blue team picking the right candidates and the red team picking the wrong candidates in key primaries. So Martin Hamburen, do your thing. The red and the blue and the gray on this map show you the Cook Political Report's ratings post-primary. Democrats lost ground in Maine with Graham Plattner. We know that, but it's still a toss-up. Ohio looks like big trouble for Republicans now. But all of these, North Carolina, Iowa, Nebraska, even Texas, have gotten worse for Republicans. But let's drill down on the yellow states. These are the states that have not had their primaries yet. You see New Hampshire and Minnesota up there. Those are the last battleground state primaries. Both are kind of reaches for Republicans. It's worth keeping an eye on because Democratic incumbents are retiring, but we don't have to sweat them for now. The next 2 Senate primaries, though, are going to tell us a lot. So let's go to Michigan. That's where Democrats are in a dogfight ahead of their August 4th primary. We would say the same thing about Michigan as we had about New Hampshire and Minnesota, but for the fact that while Republicans have settled on a strong nominee in former Congressman Mike Rogers, Democrats are at each other's throats on very divisive issues, including support for Israel. Michigan, a state Donald Trump won in 2024, increasingly looks like the best and maybe the only chance for a Republican pickup. Now, that was supposed to be Georgia, where incumbent Jon Ossoff is the only Democrat running for re-election in a state that Donald Trump won in 2024. But 2 things have happened. Ossoff has run a good campaign with very little Democratic dissent, and the Republicans have had a caterwauling catastrophe, which is going to reach its crescendo on Tuesday as the Republican primary runoff pits normie Republican Derek Dooley against MAGA Congressman Mike Collins. The president's last-minute endorsement for Collins putting an exclamation point on the MAGA takeover in Georgia. That would be really good news for Democrats and probably mean that Georgia is going to go from yellow to light blue on our map. And Jon Ossoff sounds pretty fired up about it.
So we're left with the congressman who's only a congressman because his daddy was a congressman, and the coach who's only a coach because his daddy was a coach.
With us now to talk about all of it is the veteran Democratic strategist, James Carville. We appreciate you being with us. I also figure you've got to be pretty happy about Jon Ossoff, a Southern Democrat who's finding a way to win in a red state. And he also seems like he took your advice about getting angry about the state of things. But I want to ask you about Michigan, where your party's Senate frontrunner is doing both woke and rage. Can Abdul al-Sayed beat Mike Rogers in a red-tinged swing state?
Well, sure he can, but he has to beat a nominee first. And it seems to me that Congressman Stevens and Senator McMorrow are going to have to get together, and they're just cutting into each other's vote. And I think, you know, it should be a two-way choice in Michigan, but, you know, I don't know if we're going to get there. I do have a little quibble with your map. Mississippi should definitely be on, definitely going to be a contested race, without any doubt.
What?
Mississippi is
more.
Going to be a contested race without any doubt. They lost the governorship when Biden was president by 2.5 points. political environment in Mississippi has completely changed. And the other place I would put on watch, right, is Kansas. I mean, I think it could be that expansive. But Michigan is a troubling spot. I'm not going to deny that. But everything else is coming up. John Ossoff might be the most improved candidate that I've seen in a long time.
Well,
the way he is today was when he ran in 2018 is miles and miles difference.
If they're coming in for you and past Christian, we will definitely give you the credit for putting Mississippi on our map first.
I'm in Bay St. Louis, but I'm close to past Christian, and I promise you, Mississippi is definitely in play.
Okay.
Definitely.
I want to ask you the Plattner question.
Sure.
I take your advice to Democrats basically be deal with it. He won the nomination, so they shouldn't waste any time hand-wringing at this point about what he's said in the past or what he's done in the past. But Republicans are going to use him in other races, right? They're going to try to hang him on other candidates in New England and around the country because Plattner's become pretty famous now. What do you say to the moderate Democrat who's trying to win in a tough place, in a tough district or a tough state? What do they say every time there's a new dribble of scandal that comes out? What do they do? What's your advice to them?
Well, first of all, I would make Trump the center of attention. I'm not. If I was a Democrat, there's no way I would be letting Graham Plattner be the center of attention. But Graham Plattner, people want to vote for him, and they just keep stacking these things on him, and it doesn't hurt him. And I don't think it's going to, because I think people say, it'd be nice to have 4-tour combat veteran, and like I said before, he's probably 5 degrees off. He's got some issues, but maybe we need that on the Senate floor. But Susan Collins is, presided over when America was the strongest nation on earth to now a nation lost a war with Iran. So she has to. I would answer to Susan Collins much more than people think, and I think Plattner's going to hang in there. I think these guys got some charisma. People like to stick with him. I was for Janet Mills, to be honest with you, but I didn't get my way, so I'm going to stay in the game.
Okay, so Gavin Newsom, I have to ask you about this. So Gavin Newsom turned some heads, and I assume that was the intention. He hosted Hunter Biden on his podcast. I need you to explain something about both of them. What are they thinking here? Hunter Biden has been this huge liability for your party throughout the past several years. I get why he wants to get his reputation back or change his reputation. What is Gavin Newsom doing here? Help me understand.
Okay, it's pretty clear. First of all, among Democrats, Joe Biden is well liked. I mean, I thought he should have dropped out in 2023, and I was pretty consistent about it. But I like Joe Biden. And a lot of people feel like that Hunter Biden it got a bum deal. What he did didn't deserve what he's done. And I think it was kind of politically crafty for him to bring Hunter Biden in. And there's not going to be any percentage against running against Joe Biden. I promise you. He's a well-liked man. And I think that was a smart move on Newsom's part. And, when he goes to South Carolina and campaigns, and the South Carolina Democratic voters, they treasure loyalty much more than they treasure fads. And I think that's something they're going to like, honestly do.
All right. Well, you've led me right where I wanted to be, which is I'm looking at this 2028 field, and it looks like it's going to be very crowded, right? So that raises the possibility that you could have a moderate sneak through, whether that's Ossoff or Andy Beshear from Kentucky. People are even talking about Rahm Emanuel. But it seems more likely that if the Democratic Socialists get behind one horse, they can take a narrow plurality all the way to the nomination. So how should parties... Go ahead.
Go on. The last time the Democrats nominated the most liberal candidate was 1972, and I don't think McGovern was even the most liberal candidate. Okay. It's always a hoo-ha around the progressive. They don't win anything. They're not going to win in South Carolina at all.
Well, how do they do? Tell me how the Democrats should do their primary calendar so that they get the most appealing general election candidate.
Well, the two forces in the Democratic Party should be heard the loudest are black voters and white females. And right now, I like the idea of South Carolina being the prominent state in the mix. And as you move on, that's our base. And you have to let your base have a big say in who you pick for president. Now, and I think we set up to do that.
Okay. America, if you knew that Donaldsonville was once the capital of Louisiana, I did not know that until today. You would know this man already, but if you don't, there he is. James Carville, we thank you very much for your time.
I thank you so much myself.
Heck yeah. All right, coming up, of octogenarians' octagons, Platnerian populism, and schismatic senators, our Best in the Business panel of journalists is next when The Hill Sunday returns.
Be right.
Hey, 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 with us now, our Best in the Business panel of journalists. Say hello to Alexander Bolton, senior staff writer for The Hill. Oh, yes. Abe Greenwald is back. He is the executive editor for Commentary Magazine, and our old friend Joe Khalil. He is the senior Capitol Hill correspondent for News Nation. Okay, here we go. Topic one. One step forward and two steps back.
That could happen.
On key picks and policies, the president can't decide if he wants to antagonize or get legislation passed. It only gets harder from here. Mr. Bolton, Senator Capito, if reading between the lines from Senator Capito, you can tell that she wishes that the Republicans could get over what's going on, but they're not going to get over this. This fight will continue from here, right?
Well, I thought what was interesting in her interview with you is that when you asked her about the budget reconciliation package, she did not endorse it.
No, she didn't oppose it.
Well, she expressed her preference, I think, pretty clearly in that for a supplemental package that passes through regular order. And, you know, she didn't want to say she doesn't want to do a reconciliation package, but I think it's clear from her what her preference would be. The problem is...
She's an appropriator.
Of course, there you go. She's an appropriator, and what she and other members of the Appropriations Committee don't like about the budget reconciliation process is they feel it takes power away from their committee, their Appropriations Committee. Also, you know, the last vote-a-rama, 18 hours, grueling, and I think Republicans just don't want to go through that again. The biggest problem with doing another budget reconciliation package is there are conservatives like Ron Johnson and others who want to offset the entire $350 billion. That means what? Cuts to what? Medicaid again? SNAP? I mean, where are you going to find this money? So I think that's really the biggest problem here.
Okay, you're up there every day. What's going to happen?
Yeah, look, I think things are only going to get harder from here. I think that's pretty clear. I think the rift that you brought up with President Trump and some of these Republicans is very real. I don't know that we've seen the extent of it yet, and I think the Todd Blanche nomination fight, I think, is where we're really going to see that, because you have, you know, okay, they lost votes on war powers, reconciliation's tough, you know, the weaponization thing, that was almost low-hanging fruit. But I think what we will really see in terms of President Trump's ability now to sort of push things through is going to be the Blanche one. And whether Cassidy or Tillis or someone else then decides to sort of make that stand, I think that's going to be the big one.
And the problem when people believe that the president is playing five-dimensional chess is that they are too prone to say that it's by design rather than by accident. A lot of what I'm seeing about putting the wrong nominees forward at the wrong time, the Department of Justice coming out with this weaponization fund, all of this stuff, that no one's talking to anybody else in this administration about when and how to do things.
Among the many unique things about Donald Trump is that he has a penchant, excuse me, for unifying his enemies, and viewing his friends and supporters as a target to divide and conquer. And he does it with these loyalty tests, and he punishes those who he deems disloyal.
He picks fights he doesn't need.
And having done that now to Bill Cassidy and John Cornyn, and there are other GOP senators who are going to retire because they don't want to deal with it at all, he's lost leverage when he brings up these next loyalty tests.
All right, topic two, a devil of a deal.
You know what I really love? I love the inflation.
Up between voters fed up with high gas prices and Republican hawks who don't want a resurgent Iran. The president is struggling to please everybody. Joe Khalil, you were over there, you were in the region, you covered this. Just give us the Khalil précis on what's going on.
So look, I think from a sort of, does he have support for this still? I think it sort of wanes every day. And I've talked to Republicans who have publicly said, you know, we trust him to make the call, but behind the scenes are like, whoa, I'm really worried about the gas prices still, which is an obvious thing. In terms of geopolitical, you know, at some point, one of these, we're close, is going to be the real one. You know, it's been dozens and dozens of times. I think what is different now seems to be the response from some of the Gulf states, you know, and even Iranian state media is not entirely blasting this as an impossible thing. So who knows, maybe we're close. But you heard Pence, and there are several others like him that are still saying, you know, we're just going to stay behind the president and ride this thing out.
Abe, the Iranians seem very determined to make sure that this is going to be Israel's fault. However they're going to square the circle, they're going to say, whatever delay, it's because of Israel. So that if Hezbollah is attacking Israel, so that Israel is counterattacking, and all of this stuff. The idea of a deal that doesn't achieve the things that the former vice president was talking about is not going to sit well, not just with the friends of Israel, but it's not going to sit well with hawks like Pence and others in the Republican Party who've sort of kept their trap shut so far in hopes that they would get to a good deal. What's the low water mark for a deal that the president can sell domestically?
Oh, I don't even apologize. I don't think there's one low watermark.
Okay.
The list of U.S. red lines has been made clear by Donald Trump himself several times. The complete
the nukes, the missiles.
Right, and they have to hand over the dust. Yeah. Right. We don't want them supporting their proxies in the region. There's a whole slew of things. Without that entire raft of U.S. red lines met, we're looking at a terrible deal, and I don't think anyone really thinks otherwise.
Okay. Mr. Bolton, question for you. It would have been better if the president had gotten authorization. If he had gotten the Republicans on the hook on Iran first, they wouldn't have so much leverage now to second guess him, right?
Well, and that's something that, for instance, Senator Todd Young of Indiana, who's not a big Trump fan, he's kind of a traditional, you know, Reagan, Bush, you know, strong defense type Republican.
They got a lot of that out in Indiana.
He has said, like, look, if the president had gotten, you know, more buy-in from the outset, he would have had more time to prosecute the war. I think the problem here is that the president's just running out of time because he's running out of money. He's not going to be able to get a supplemental through, and so how much more space does he really have to prosecute this war? I think that's why he's rushing a deal.
And the Iranians trolling him about his birthday tells us that they know very well about American domestic political pressures and where to make it more difficult. All right, topic 3, mad as a Plattner.
You know who's a Democrat? Zoran Mamdani. You know who's a Democrat? Graham Plattner. You know who's a Democrat? Abigail Stamberger.
Top Democrats are increasingly giving in to the anger of their party's base. But will it wash with the persuadables in November? Abe, we start with you on this one. James Carville gave advice to the Democratic Party, which was go. I forget what it was, but it was to not be woke, but to be angry, right? Don't be woke, but you should be angry. But as I talked to him about Mr. El Sayed, there are Democrats who are both, right? There are Democrats who are both far left and really angry. How real is this as a liability for Democrats?
And there are Democrats who are far left, really angry, and extreme in other ways as well. Look, I think it's a big liability. The Democrats are working with what they have, and what they have is, in reality, Americans who are dissatisfied with the economy, with the war in Iraq, the direction of the country in general. That, as rage, that's real. The problem with rage as a strategy is that it changes the face of your party. And we see it now changing the face of the Democratic Party.
The Republicans know.
And where does that leave, in the medium term, in the long term, where does that leave moderate leaders and moderate voters?
Democrats, Joe, have come to terms with Graham Plattner. But Abe does raise a good point here that the anger is contagious and burning things down is contagious.
Yeah, he does. And, you know, I would say the problem with the liability about rage as a sort of political tool is that it's working, is that it has worked. There's a reason that there was not enthusiasm for Janet Mills among Democrats. But I will say to Graham Plattner specifically in Maine, I think at this point it is going to be a problem. You know, Mills got 20% of the vote, and I think people are overlooking that for a candidate who wasn't trying at all. So if it's 20% in Maine among Democrats, then how many independents? What's that percentage that are maybe would have otherwise, minus the scandal, supported him and then not? Because that's sort of the ball game in Maine, right? That's
Alex, the gritted teeth of Chuck Schumer as he said, "Oh, we're going to win in Maine. We're going to keep doing it." Like, is this sustainable?
Well, I think Schumer's going to have a problem come 2027, no matter what, because people who are being elected, like Graham Plattner, say they don't want to vote for him to be majority leader or to be Democratic leader. So Democrats are angry at Trump and the establishment, but Schumer is as much a part of the establishment as anyone else. So what does it mean for his future? He probably hangs on as Democratic leader through 2028, but after that, I think the party wants real change.
All right, very quickly, topic 4, taking a dive.
We are fighting on Sunday night on the White House lawn, no matter what.
The administration wanted to have an argument about good taste around tonight's cage match at the White House, but paydays for Trump allies and advertisers may be the scandal that sticks. Joe, what do you think? Does it have political legs? People talking about the Bud Light endorsements and the money for the UFC and all of this stuff for the claw. What do you say?
I just think there have been so many other things that probably were more high profile than this. You know, there are several allegations, and many of them have backing of this administration and how the Trump family has been making money.
Yeah, so that fits the narrative.
You know, it does. But, you know, when you look at, I think, all of it in total, I don't know. I mean, does this have sticking power? Almost, what else has at this point?
America is awesome, and America is wild and weird. It is so wild and weird that even European soccer fans know that America, the wildness of America, they go to Buc-ee's and gun shops and they say, "Ach du lieber, America is super cool." So I don't think that the violence part of the UFC is a problem here, but there's an unseemliness in this about rewarding friends and that stuff.
You know, when Donald Trump is racking up wins, which he sometimes does for a long stretch, as when he first came to office this term, and all his sideshow stuff.
He agrees with me, and that's good enough. What's good enough here is that Abe, through a froggy throat, has agreed with me. Thank you for being with us, guys. We really appreciate you all. Okay, it's almost time for a Star-Spangled Almanac, but first, a somber note. Gordon Wood, the preeminent historian of the American Revolution, whose work shaped perceptions of the bicentennial and who was a hale and hearty 92 looking forward to the semi-quincentennial, died tragically last week, which brought to mind his visit with us here and his answer to my question about whether the American Revolution had been worth it, given all the criticisms of the founding. His answer is worth hearing again.
Oh, of course. What created what became, they could scarcely foresee this, what became the most powerful nation in the history of the world. So it was a momentous event by any, whether you agree with the results or not, you have to recognize that this was a momentous event, creating a nation that was at least ostensibly dedicated to liberty.
Mutual. This is your almanac for today, Sunday, June 14th, 2026. Happy Flag Day. On this day in 1777, the Continental Congress adopted our first official flag with 13 stripes and 13 stars, one for each state in the new nation, a symbol of unity and pride for citizens suffering through a third year of a painful revolution. The stars and stripes were based on the Grand Union flag carried by the Continental Army in 1776. After victory came expansion. First Vermont and then Kentucky. Suddenly, 13 stars and 13 stripes were not enough. In 1795, a new flag with 15 stars and 15 stripes was unfurled. The same tall standard that inspired Francis Scott Key's The Star-Spangled Banner 2 decades later. By 1818, when Congress again considered the flag, 5 additional states had joined the Union, with many more queued up for admission. Adding stripes wasn't going to work. So back to 13 in honor of the original states, but 1 star could be added for each new state, effective the following 4th of July. The current design came in 1960 after Hawaii's admission. More than 3,000 Americans submitted ideas to a presidential commission, including an Ohio high school junior, Bob Bob Heft, who had also submitted his design as a history project. He got a B- on the assignment, but still sent it to his congressman, who brought it to the committee. On July 4th, 1960, Heft stood beside President Dwight Eisenhower to watch the young man's design officially unfurled. So whatever you're stitching together this week, we hope it's an inspiration. Until next time.